You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Life Check Yourself with Heidi Dusek. Do you really have to wait to start living your dream life now? Ladies, welcome into my studio. We are going to life check your ass today. I'm super excited to introduce you to a very cool woman who I met in the adventure of my own life. Heidi Dusek is here with us. She is referred to as a catalyst, a healthy disruptor, and an unshakable optimist. And if that does not make you weak in the knees, I don't know what will. Her passion lies in challenging the status quo. So hold on to your seat, driving change and designing experiences. Today, she and her husband live in Wisconsin with their 3 children and a dog. They travel frequently. They spend a lot of time outdoors while both working full time. They're remodeling their 3rd generation farmhouse. She's got a book coming out, which she's going to talk about. And her business, Ordinary Sherpa, inspires families to create authentic travel experiences through tourism, which I'm excited to hear about too. Meaningful family connections through simple backyard adventures and designing a life of joy. So I'm super happy that you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marni. It's so exciting to be on the show. I love the energy and enthusiasm you bring to your listeners. It's so fun.
Well, I the reason why I said, like, you know, if that doesn't make you weak in the knees, I think one of the things that the time that we're in right now is the universe decided to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It's a revolution a little bit here. Yeah. It's so fun. I know there's so many people too that are like, oh, I just want to go back to normal. I'm like, why? Here's your opportunity. Like, let's take hold and, catch your seat and hold on.
Well, what's really interesting is that I'm living in my RV full time, as you know, and I'm in Atlanta, and I got to go out with my high school friend and a bunch of her friends. Last night, one of them's moving from Atlanta to Florida, and I was like, how did you make that happen? And she said something really profound, which I'd love for you to kind of talk about as we dive in here. She said, back in the olden days, you wanted to move somewhere, you wanted to do something, and you got a job that was sort of there. You had to sort of organize and orient your whole life to where will I work. And she was like, I had total freedom of like, where in literally the world do I want to be? Because my employer was good enough to say, yeah, be remote, right? And she's like, but if my employer wouldn't have, I could have found any other remote job. So when you think about like what is challenging the status quo mean right now, and how do we start to think that way and get out of our comfort zone? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So one of the things I love to challenge all the way like back in my 20s even was this concept of like work-life balance. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why are we even talking about work separate than life? Like, no, it's your life and you get to decide what you want your life to look like. And so maybe work is a part of that. I mean, obviously I still needed an income at that point. So I needed to figure out like, what is the metric that I care about in order to have a thriving life? And it landed on joy. Like, what are the things that bring me joy? And if it's not bringing me joy, like, minimize that or cut it out of your life. I think that was the initial starting point for me to be like, what the heck are we doing these horrible things? If we don't like it, then figure out a way to get rid of that stuff in your life and really design a life you love.
And when somebody is looking at the status quo and they have a lot of stories in their head, what do you do to sort of start to warm up to this idea of like designing experiences and starting to be a catalyst in your own life for change?
Yeah. So I love to look back. Again, I focus a lot on joy only because that became like a North Star for me. Is I looked back and said, okay, in the last 30 days, last year, whichever, like what are the highlights of my life? If I was to create a highlight reel, what were the points where I was like, this was amazing. I remember this. This was like, I want to recreate that. So my little like mantra that I started, because as I was doing my own work, I had this mantra that I would say is I want every day to feel like vacation. Because for me, the joy was coming from traveling and I could not get enough. But I didn't really like have the money at the time. So that was one of the stories I was telling myself is I don't have enough money to travel full time. And I kind of flipped it for a second and said, what if every day was a vacation? What would that mean? Like, what does that look like for us? And that really helped me go, okay, I can afford travel. I just have to think about it differently. Like, what about travel rewards? Or what if travel didn't have to cost that much? Or what if I started staying with friends rather than staying in hotels? So I think writing that narrative out for yourself and then, go through with like a highlighter or something and be like, is this true? Is this really true? And what are the parts of the story that I actually love about my life? And what's the stuff I just want to get rid of? Or I need to like really challenge myself to think differently about that. And those narratives, I think you continue to learn. And I think podcasting for me has been really one of those ways where I hear so many different stories and I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like, why did I think I couldn't negotiate for my own schedule? Or why didn't you get ingrained with what's comfortable around you. So for me, it's like highlighting the joy of your life and then really testing the boundaries of comfort. Like, what is it within this little story or this narrative that I'm not comfortable with? And now I need to get uncomfortable a little bit. Like, I don't have to jump off the cliff. I don't have to go skydiving, but like, what's the little thing I could do just to test the waters?
I love that. I was thinking when you were talking about when I got divorced, I was like, I had my 3 kids, they were little, and adventure and travel was like a huge thing for me. And I sort of became in a completely different financial space than I was when I was married. And I became a pioneer back in the day of like home exchanging, doing home swaps. And I literally was like taking my kids like all over the world, like staying in someone else's home, which was super cool. And we didn't do like all the fancy glitzy things. And we got, some croissants and we shopped and we cooked and we did things in a really simple way. But I think that example was something that really has been a shining moment in my life as an example of what you're saying, is that wherever you are in your journey, like, what are all the things that you're telling yourself that you can't or are not possible, especially now? I mean, like, you talk a lot, I know, about this whole idea of like untourism, like, yeah. Tell me about that, and how does someone, if they were going to say like, how can I use adventure to, like create connection and create meaning and joy in my life, in my situation now, how can I start to think about this?
Yeah. So it goes back to that concept of like challenging the status quo, right? So when we think about travel in particular, so I'm using the term untourism is like a way to travel differently. And some people might call it like travel like a local. Some might call it slow travel. Some might call it whatever they want to call it. But for me, I use the word untourism because for me, it's like that. It's a little bit of like a rebel against the industry to say like, no, I'm not going to sign up for your luxury brand. I'm not going to like prescribe to the fact that vacation has to be defined by like this break from work that I'm escaping from my life. Like, I can think about this differently. So for us, when we talk about like untourism, it is really about where can I go that most people don't know about? Like, it's like the adventure is in finding the opportunity or like finding out what's cool about this place. And in some ways, it's kind of reversing the narrative of like, I don't have a bucket list anymore because I don't even know what needs to go on the list because there's so many opportunities out there that it's more about like finding those things and digging in and getting to know people. And like, we sometimes will do a challenge like, all right, we're going to eat out today or we're going to spend the afternoon in this community. I want you to find the best food, the best place for ice cream, and 10 people's favorite, I don't know, name coffee shop or movie theater or like something cool about this town. So it becomes more of like an adventure in the process. And I don't have to have it all planned out either. So for the fact that I have 3 kids, I mean, you can remember this too.
Yes.
Like, there's this point where it's like, I don't want to plan everything because I don't know, like it could change in 30 seconds based on my child's mood. So I somewhat need to have like a back pocket item, but I don't really want to prescribe us to like, oh, this is the plan. And the more we've done this, those are like the bright shining stars of our experiences. Is like, we remember, I'm trying to think of an example. We remember this odd little diner like hodunk hole in the wall place. But the person at the gas station, I was like, okay, I don't really want to know where you think I should go for lunch. Where would you go for lunch? I got 3 kids. We love little like Southern food. And they're like, oh, you need to go to this place. This is where like the old people go. And it's super cheap. And they're going to be a little bit like, rough around the edges. I was like, that's perfect. That's my place. That's where I want to go. And it was great because we were like making paper airplanes. I mean, the waitress was just playing with us. So that's the things my kids remember are none of the things that I was spending all the money on. I could have spent thousands of dollars on attractions and they'd be like, oh, but that diner, that like $30 diner was awesome.
I love that. It's funny. Jeremy and I were in Napanee, Indiana, where we picked up our RV and we came across a diner. And it was epic. It was like so old, right? It was, and my favorite thing, well, first of all, the food was actually amazing. But we went in there and like, I will remember this for the rest of my life. It was like 10 old guys, it was the middle of the afternoon. Like they were just hanging, talking about politics. And it was like the middle of America. And I was like, this is who politicians are talking to. Like it just hit me, right? Because I came from California, right? Like they're not talking to me. They're not talking to the people in my neighborhood. They're talking to these guys. And I think I will remember that diner, which was an accident, for the rest of my life, because it was really an opportunity to really experience like middle America and be in this time. And so when you think about this untourism thing and looking at what creates meaning and joy. And I think this is really funny and I'm excited to hear your answer. So if you're going to plan to be unintentional, meaning like to be open, and let's say you're traveling like with kids or you're a solo female traveler, or here's one, we have a lot of clients like this. You're with your partner who may or may be new or newish, but you're not married and you have different financial resources. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. How do you create something meaningful?
Yeah. Awesome. I love this. So I'm going to go back to the days when it was just me and he wasn't even my husband. I still joke. I got to tell this story because I think it's funny. I was like on this mission to find the perfect man, right? And I met this guy in Kohl's of no. And the only reason I think he married me was because he had a motorcycle and I was like, that's interesting. And I made him take me to Sturgis. And he was like, you're making me go to Sturgis. And I was like, yeah. And then when we get there, I think we should get a bigger bike. I didn't like have this plan all planned out, but I was like, I think that we're going to do this. We did it in a weekend. And let me tell you, I was like, just like throw in the tent. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there. And this is so not his personality. He is by the book. Like he had never traveled in his life. He had never even thought of like just whimsically jumping on a motorcycle and going away for a weekend. So I love this piece because it was like, okay, what are the basic things that I have to do in order to get him on board? And it was do something he likes. So if you've got someone who's like not invested in travel, so my husband was not invested in travel. So I was like, it became a challenge for me to be like, okay, what can we do for this budget that he would agree on? So I used his budget as like, okay, our family travel budget for years was $2,500. Do you know how fun that is with 5 kids or with 3 kids? Like, it was just, but they became a challenge. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do. And we figured it out. And then it became like, okay, so we realized hotels aren't working for us. What else could we do? We started camping a little bit more. Well, I don't really love this camping thing of like sleeping on the ground in a tent. It got to that point where I'm like, dude, take me to Walmart. I can't handle it.
Right, exactly.
So I think, it's really when you look at like the grandiose opportunities or like what is it you want this experience to look like, and then scale it back and just go, okay, what's the next first step? If I was going to do like in business terms, minimal viable product, like what is the littlest thing that I need to do to kind of have that experience? So I need to eat. Okay, well, we'll figure that out. I'm sure there's going to be restaurants along the way. We're going to need whatever it is, like gas stations. Those are a dime a dozen. Usually just know where the last one is before you run out. It doesn't actually take as much as we think it does. So I just kind of map out, we're going on a Northwest United States and Canada road trip here in a couple of months, and we're going to be gone for over 30 days. And it was like, okay, what's the minimum? What's the least we need to figure out? And that was, we don't want to travel more than 4 hours in a day.
Yep.
We want to stay 3 to 4 nights at a location so that we can really dig in. We can have fun. So it doesn't feel like we're driving the entire time. The things that are important to my kids are swimming and maybe riding bike. Like, how are we going to find swimming? When you really scale it back, it's really simple. And then you find ways to like, we've had a couple experiences where we wanted to go swimming and I was like, I'm not doing that water park. It is like $80 for that water park. That's ridiculous. Let's check out a local swimming pool. And they're like $3, so it got to that point where I was like, you can do both. You can have the quality experience that your kids want, or live on the budget that your husband wants or your partner wants. And I think that when you start to navigate like, oh, how can we do this for less? It becomes a challenge. And that's what I love, because now I'm like, ooh, give me the puzzle pieces. Let me fit this together. So I think you just got to like work through the pieces and say like, what's the next first step? If we were going to scale this all the way back to the basics, what does that look like?
I think that's really important because, this idea of like an adventure or an experience that you want that brings you joy. I mean, that's kind of what you said at the beginning, right? And then it's like, okay, children, partner, date, guy I'm dating, it's our first trip together, right? Like, what are the experiences that we want to have, or the feelings that we want to have? And then how can we create that in different ways? Now, here is something that I think is so brilliant about this idea of untourism, being that when you want to do something and you're trying to be spontaneous, like all the fancy shits and the popular shits already booked.
Yeah.
Right? So instead of going like, we'll never be able to do anything 4th of July, it's June 3rd or whatever it is. Like this. So how does untourism like even create like more better possibility and allow you to not be limited by the construct of like what you should do when you go to a town or a city or a country?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I love this. Yeah. I always joke like, well, part of it is when you go to Paris, you're obviously going to do the Eiffel Tower, right? So just like allow that to happen, but don't let that define your trip. So we always say like, well, that's just like a given, knock it off. Like, well, I mean, like knock it off, but like check it off the box. Not going to spend my time planning around that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'll still be able to see it, right? It's in the sky. Like I don't have to over exemplify or over glorify this. To go back to your question though, is like, so what do you do when all that stuff is, what is it you want to do? I think rather than deciding what your experience is going to be like based on the destination, like what is the experience you're looking for, as opposed to like, what's the thing I'm going to see? We have gotten to that point where it's less about what we're doing and where we are, but rather like, how are we doing this? How are we going to enjoy this moment? It's like the journey experience, right? So we all want to glorify the summit. We all want to get to the peak. We want to have this ultimate experience. And I really like to say, but that doesn't happen without a couple of like, you can't really enjoy the peak without some work. If you don't put in the effort on the other end, sometimes I'm like, it's okay to have a little struggle. A little struggle journey is not the end of the world. So part of it for us is like, no, I think part of the joy comes from having some rough spots where you're like, how are we going to figure this one out, you guys? Like, let's take this with a, I don't know, attaboy kind of attitude. Right. Figure it out. So going back to the things like, what do we think? I'll go back to the point of like, I don't know what the best of are in this area. I could Google it, but I might, I will say I do have a list. I see things all the time in social media or in different groups that I'm in, and I'll be like, oh, that's intriguing. And I just copy and paste them into a Google Drive. So if I'm in the worst case scenario where like we're stranded, I can't think of anything to do and I can't find a single soul to talk to, well, I could probably find this list that I have somewhere, but then it's like, it's not about, like I said, going back to it's really about just simple having conversations, being curious when you get there to say, where would you go for ice cream? Where should I, what's open today that I should go see that you think is interesting about this place? Or what if in the years that you've lived here, just having some good questions in your back pocket, I think also just helps. I don't know.
I love that. One other thing that I think is really interesting is this idea of like the journey, like you said, the journey itself is part of the experience. And when someone is traveling, with anyone other than themselves, right? There's going to be conflict and it's not going to be like you said, this perfect idea of what this like experience should be. And so, like you said, a little struggle in the experience is actually sometimes those things that you remember the most, right? It's those moments that didn't happen. So let's talk about this. When you think about, what it is that is part of like the Ordinary Sherpa brand and what your book is about. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is the gift of that you want our listeners to start to think about?
Yeah. Going back to that comment I made earlier about, when I first started thinking about life as more of an adventure rather than this travel-based mindset, I got thinking about what is adventure. And really, adventure at the simplest form, like Webster Dictionary will define it for you as an uncomfortable experience that might be a little risky. And so I was like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with where we go. Like, we can experience that anywhere. So for me, it was simplifying things down to like, we can have adventures in our own area. In the midst of COVID, obviously, this was like glaringly obvious. I had a moment where my work got insane during COVID. So I was just like stressed out. There's 3 kids at home. We've got a home remodel project. Like, it was nuts. And I remember for 45 minutes on Wednesday afternoons, I would just take a break at 3:00 and I would go outside and like just watch my kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, they don't need all this crap that I've, stuffed at them, the screens and the toys and they don't need all that. They just needed to go hang out on these trees. And I have a picture of them. All 3 of them are laying like as sloths on a tree. They look like 3 sloths. And I was like, dude, slow down. I need to just slow down and relax. So I think, when you think about adventure, it's not always climbing Mount Everest. It's not always skydiving. It's not all these really epic, crazy things. It's just writing down like, what are the things that I really want out of my life? I just interviewed someone on my podcast who works with hospice patients. And I think it's fascinating because when they are at their end of life, they have a lot of regrets, right? And so what is it about your life? If you could look back, I joke, I wrote my own eulogy one time just to like say, like, what do I actually want my life to be? And then how am I going to live into that? So Ordinary Sherpa was really designed to fill a space that's not these glorified, beautiful, epic, Instagram worthy shots. Those things might happen, but they're not reality in my world because I still have 3 kids hanging off of me. So I'm like, okay, so what is it that is my reality and how far am I willing to take this? What makes it uncomfortable? What are we willing to test as a family? And then, you learn through the struggle. I think we can build a stronger, resilient family if we work through the hard times. I've just had an experience where my daughter got hurt on vacation. It sucked. I'm not going to tell you, but what that helped me understand is if we're going to be traveling, we have an RV as well. So we're considering what I call like part-time work or part-time RV living. And so we've talked about this, like, what does that mean for health insurance? What does that mean when we're not on W-2 employees? What does that mean? So I look at it now as an opportunity to say, it didn't go according to plan, but it gave us an opportunity to test something that I didn't really want to test in real life. But now I have a better perspective of like, how do I need to talk with the insurance company? And it's not the fun stuff that you always want to deal with, but now I'm a much better person on the other end of that because that happened.
You're making me think of, we took my kids to Italy when they were little, and they got some bites. Something was going on, right? And I was like, what in the hell is this? And so, I ended up going into the emergency room in Rome. This was before like Google Translate, right? So it wasn't like, can you just talk into my phone? Oh no, I know the way it went. We went to a pharmacy first because in Europe they're like these big green signs. They're everywhere, right? We go into the pharmacy and the woman is saying like, I can't even remember the word now. It was like Vera, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, like I don't have an Italian dictionary. We're like looking for a bookstore. Anyway, and then we can't figure it out, so we go to the emergency room, and it really took a lot to figure it out. But it was chicken pox. And they'd already had it. And, it was so bizarre. But anyway, to this day, my kids will tell you, like, remember? Remember? Because there were like people in gurneys. And I was like, don't look at the people. Eyes straight ahead. Eyes straight ahead. And the kids were like, Mommy, you don't have to pay. And I'm like, no, you don't have to pay here. It's insane. You just leave. But it was just like, those are the experiences. And I think that what happens is, like, people get so afraid of what could happen that they don't do anything.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we get so scared. So to go back to like
Yeah.
challenging the status quo, I was recently at a conference where Pico Iyer spoke, and he's like an amazing travel writer. And he had a quote that really stuck with me is the countries we hear the most about are actually the countries we know the least about, because the media really puts these scare tactics on, or we hear things like the horror stories of drug cartels in Mexico. And so I've gotten to that point where like someone wants to scare me away from this, or I start thinking these things myself. I try to find a source that's like closest to that space. So have you been to that spot in Mexico? Okay, good. Then don't talk to me about it. Like
Right.
I just don't trust the sources unless someone has actually been there and experienced it firsthand, because otherwise I don't have enough information then to make a decision.
Yeah,
So
no, totally.
that I think that fear though, right? That fear is so loud, and it can just keep us in our place, and we just continue to hold these like small spaces for what's comfortable. And yeah, that's a sign, right? That's a good indicator. Like, oh, there's something there. Like lean into that. Let's play with this fear a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this before we wrap up, because I think this is super important. Like, I think that when people are single, especially, they think, adventure, and they think it's something hard. I think there's this like, you know, paradigm, like an adventure is, you have to like, live on your own in a forest, or you have to zip line, or you have to do any sort of thing that someone calls an adventure. And it's really interesting because I always thought of myself as adventurous. And then I met my husband, and he's like an adrenaline junkie adventurous. And for a minute, I was like, oh, am I not adventurous? And then I realized like we all have our own experience of what an adventure is.
Right.
And some people think that it's something hard. So can you talk about simple adventures and how you make an adventure simple?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I was the typical like striver in life, just so you know, like I was the single white female that was doing all the things. And at 25, I called it, I had a quarter life crisis, because I was like, crap, I followed the plan and I don't like this plan anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I called it my little year of yes. Like every time there was an opportunity that I was like, I just challenged myself to say yes to that opportunity. And it was everything from like dog sitting to taking trapeze lessons to sitting in silence for an hour. Like that is quite an adventure for someone like me who cannot sit still. Like it didn't necessarily have anything to do with where I was going or what I was doing on these experiences. It became this like year of all these different things that I had never done before. And one of my favorite experiences from that year was I decided to run a marathon, and I am not a runner. Okay, well, that's a limiting belief there. I guess I could run if someone was chasing me. Like I could do it if I really had to, but I never would have called myself a runner. But there was something like, that seems hard. I wonder if I could. And so instead of saying like, no, I'm not a runner, I just started saying, I wonder if I could. And on one of my training runs, it became so fun. I met these like amazing women who were all different. I don't know. I like to call them like genres, right? So you had the super adventurous, you had this like career professional, you had this like newly divorced, like we had all these different stories. And one training run, we are literally running in the rain, and I'm laughing because I'm like, y'all, like we don't have to finish this training run. The trailhead's back there. Like, can we stop, please? Like, what are we doing? Well, then we became like little 5-year-olds, like splashing in the puddles and screaming, and like we just let this like crazy, I don't know, shield or armor that we had around who we were supposed to be as runners, as these women runners. We let it all go, and damn it, it was so freaking freeing. I had so much fun that I was like, I came back soaked. I was disgusting. I smelled, but we finished a 10-mile run, and I'd never run 10 miles. No, I don't even think I ever ran in rain. I don't even think I ran 30 minutes in a rain before. Right. So it was this crazy, like sometimes it's really just the simple things that we don't think we can do, like flip it and say like, I wonder if I could do that. And you never know. Those are some of my greatest friends. And I still kind of joke back and forth with them about that stupid training run we did in the rain. Like, why did we do that? But it was a good lesson for me.
It's so true. And I think, for those people who are like waiting to adventure or waiting to feel like, they're doing like, whether it's a bucket list or they're, just something that I wonder if I could or what it would be like until I get my partner, until my partner retires, until I lose weight, until, there's never one more case of COVID ever. Like there's a lot of people who are waiting to live their life. So What do you say to that?
What is the first thing you can do tomorrow that's going to challenge you? Not necessarily to do the big thing, right? But what can I do tomorrow? Because if you don't take that first step, I always call like, you can sit and collect all the gurus you want, but that's just you learning more about what is possible and what you don't sign up for. And I think that's a cage. They say like there's a difference between a circle. If the 5 people around you are your circle and they aren't allowing you to live your best life, that's not a circle, that's a cage. So like if you're actually going to want to break out of that cage, you have to decide to do one thing that makes you uncomfortable. And even if like that's an experience, right? You learn from that, you can test it and go, oh, that didn't work, I didn't like it. Well, you can either go back in the cage, or you can take another step forward and say, okay, what's the next first thing that I'm going to try today? You have to take action. You have to do something to get a little bit uncomfortable and say, there's times I'm still in this boat, right? This is not something that you become an expert at. You are always going to be challenged, and you just have to work through those challenges every single day. I keep toying with this idea of taking a gap year. And every time I like take the step, I'm like, oh, I get nervous and I step back. I'm like, maybe we should wait another 6 months. And it's gotten to that point where I'm like, what's going to change in 6 months? What's going to be then the thing, right? What am I going to have in 6 months that I'm not going to have now? And it's so easy to just push this, kick the can one more day, but I've had enough opportunities to, I've had car accidents and, things like that, where it's like, why would I wait? Because what if 6 months doesn't happen? What if there's not, that's a lot of the regrets we hear from the older population is like, I wish I could have.
Yeah.
I wish I would have. So I always say like, why are we going to put off our RV life until we're retired? I don't know. I see my parents now, they're in their 70s. And I'm like, they're not really like hiking and biking and going many places because it's hard now. Their bodies aren't able to handle some of the things that they wanted to do. So am I going to be 70-year-olds looking back and say, gosh, I wish I would have at 20 and 30 and 40 and 50? Those are the things that kind of keep me moving forward and taking steps forward.
Girl, that's why I'm living on the road right now. I was like, I cannot wait. One thing I do want to say, and I just love it. So you all have to get, Heidi just is about ready to launch her book. It's called Beyond Normal, a field guide to embrace adventure, explore the wilderness, and design an extraordinary life with kids. And I think whether you have kids or not, it's going to be a great read to help you extend beyond the edge of what you think you should do in your life. And I'm just like thinking back, and I've been thinking about this since I met you, that, I was that one who took my kids, to the crazy house in Paris that we did the home swap with the rabbit that got away, that we had to like chase it down the street so we didn't lose these people's rabbit. And all these adventures that I took my kids on, and now they're 26, 20, almost 24, and almost 20. And I would say like the downside of that is that my kids are like, I'm going to go work in Mexico for 5 weeks. Yeah. I'm going to go, I'm going to go live in Boston and do this internship, and I'm not coming home. Right. And it's that, but it's so beautiful because as I see them now looking for like people that they want to partner up with and who they want to be in community with and how they're designing their work life, fuck balance, right? How they're designing their life so that work is a part of it and not something that's in the way of it. They're out there, the next generation of people saying like, let's have a whole life. And so I love that you're doing this. I love that it's your mission, because I think that as we started this conversation, the universe decided to challenge the status quo. I think that your work is raising the next generation to be able to innovate within that, and that we're all going to be just fine.
Yes. I love it. And I've been really fortunate. There have been a few like random souls out there that were doing this long before I ever knew it was possible. So whatever that thing is, I always say like, find someone 2 rungs up on your ladder. We sometimes like to find someone at the top of the ladder, like winning at life. Fuck that. Like look for someone 2 rungs up and be like, hey, let's get to know each other. I had to create my own tribe. I couldn't find a tribe that I fit well with. So I created my own. And it's usually the people that are like a couple rungs up or maybe a couple rungs behind me on certain things. Like we're never always on our game in all aspects of life. There's always going to be someone ahead of you. Lift them up, lean back, pull the people up from behind you. You're going to find a tribe, but you got to start looking for them.
I love it. So even if you're single people, have your family adventure. And guess what? I think the bottom line is that when you live this life that Heidi's prescribing, your energy goes up, and you're going to, in all those experiences, you might meet your guy in Kohl's.
Yeah. Right.
I love it. Or REI or Target when you're looking to buy that tent. Exactly. Heidi, thank you so much for being here. Ladies, check out the show notes. You can find out where you can get Heidi's new book, Beyond Normal, A Field Guide to Embrace Adventure, Explore the Wilderness, and Design an Extraordinary Life with Kids. And whatever you do, think about your own life and your own adventure or lack thereof, and damn life check yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes, and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.